Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to my channel. This is Brad with Being Chill. Today I want to talk about why the PS5 is going to have less native 120 frames per second games available than the Xbox Series X and Series S respectively. But before we get into that, I do want to ask, if you're not already, to please subscribe to my channel. I upload new videos every week, so make sure you subscribe and click that bell so you can stay up to date on all the latest tech news with me. Now let's get into it. So a big selling point for these next generation consoles is the fact that they support 4K 120 frames per second gaming if the developers choose to enable it. And we're already seeing games on both sides, the Xbox and the PS5, both have games that support 120 frames per second. However, one situation we are seeing start to arise is that not all games that have 120 frames per second on the Xbox are going to have 120 frames per second support on the PS5. And those two games right now are currently Call of Duty Warzone as well as Rocket League, and I'm sure there's many others and many others to follow. Now, the Rocket League developer Psyonix has come out and stated the reason why is because on the Xbox Series X and S, they just have to implement a small patch to turn the feature on these next generation consoles. However, on the PS5, they do have to rewrite the whole application into a native PS5 game instead of just patching the PS4 version of the game. And the reason why is because the PS4 did not support 120 FPS gaming, whereas the Xbox One did. And so the Xbox One games can be adapted to the next-gen console simply by turning that feature on and implementing a small patch that will be pushed out to users. But people that have the PS5 will not be able to get support for that unless the developers choose to spend the resources to rewrite the whole application for the PS5 and enable that feature. And I think a lot of developers like the Rocket League developer Psyonix are going to choose not to spend the resources on that because they have feelings that they could better spend that time or money doing other things than to waste time implementing a feature that small on a console that they will likely be implementing sequels for. Now, I don't think Rocket League is going to have a sequel anytime soon, and if they do, it probably will be in the very far future. But they may choose to add this support in the future, but they said for right now they're just too focused on transitioning from free-to-play, and they're adding new features like their tournament modes for them to spend the money and resources to add 120 frames per second. But I imagine in the future they will choose to implement it simply because Rocket League is not a game that requires sequels, whereas Call of Duty does. So Activision is probably going to choose not to spend the resources to make Warzone 120 frames per second on the PS5, simply because they're just going to release the next Call of Duty, and then the old Call of Duty will not be as important. And I think a lot of other developers that are making new games are going to feel the same way. Another thing I find interesting is that in the past, Xbox has supported 1440p resolution alongside 120 frames per second on the Xbox One, but the PS5 has added support for 120 frames per second, but Sony has elected to omit the 1440p resolution choice on this console, and I don't really see why they did that. Maybe they'll add it in the future, but for right now I think it's a weird decision because I think that's a nice middle ground for some people where they can balance out performance and still have good graphics and good visuals on the screen. But for now, we're going to be limited to 4K on the PS5, whereas the Xbox Series X and Series S can do 1440p. So of course this is only a short-term issue simply because a lot of people are going to be buying these new consoles, and since the game library will be pretty sparse right now, people are going to be playing some of their older games that they had from previous generation consoles on these next-gen consoles. And so right now, most people are going to be playing these older games, but in the future, as more games start to come out and people start buying them and they have new games that they like to play, this is going to be less of an issue, but it will still be there until a lot of the developers catch up, or if Sony decides to spend the resources to make it easier for developers to add that feature from their previous generation games. I would hope that they would do that, but we'll have to wait and see how Sony decides to approach that. So if you're really looking forward to playing 120 FPS games and you were looking at the PS5, maybe you should consider getting the Xbox Series X if your main priority is going to be playing games right now and playing some backwards compatibility games from previous generation consoles, simply because the majority of games on the PS5 that were made for the previous gen consoles are not going to be supporting 120 frames per second. And I imagine most developers are going to choose that it's just not worth the time and effort. Now, that's not to say that all games aren't going to be supporting it. For what it's worth, Destiny 2 has stated that on December 8th, they are going to be releasing 120 frames per second for their Crucible game mode on both the Xbox Series X and the PS5. So there will be developers who will choose to do it, but I imagine the majority of them will not, like I said earlier. That's all I've got for this video. Make sure you smash that like button if you learned a little bit, and let me know down in the comments whether you think Sony's going to step up and make it easier for developers to add 120 FPS support to their games, or if they're just going to brush it under the rug and maybe consider this going forward with the PS6. Now, once again, I upload new videos every week, so make sure you subscribe and click that bell so you can stay up to date on all the latest tech news, unboxings, tech tips, etc. Now, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.